Perfect. So on the agenda today, what we'll be primarily focusing on is how to get started with food project for the community, the planning steps that are required, how do grants work, and how have other communities done this process already, and then the key crucial part is submitting and then the reporting involved with all the grants. So how to get started with planning for your food sovereignty project and project goals. So the key component of any grant process is to really understand what the core goal of the project is, what is the desired end goal for the community or the organization, and what are the measurable outcomes, and then what previous projects have been done in the similar space. So has the community done a traditional greenhouse before, a community garden, and the learnings from those projects are really crucial as well. Another important factor before starting out the whole funding journey is really engaging with the community and what work has been done at that level. So who would be involved in the project? What departments are involved? Will the community's school be involved? Just having the right conversations and sort of having those ideas put together. And finally, you want to make sure you have a sort of understanding of who will be leading the project. So from a planning perspective on who's going to be taking ownership of that, and then on the operational side as well. So who'd be managing the community food project day to day. So the key steps that we primarily focus on is really understanding the project pillars of the food sovereignty project from the get-go. So is it going to be a food sovereignty component of it, where it's supplying produce and food for the local community needs? Second component is the economic development component. We'll be selling some of the food locally to cover costs, and then the education and training and capacity building side of the project. So it doesn't have to be one or either, but by really narrowing down on these options, really figure out what the goals of the community are, we could try to figure out what grant opportunities are available. So there are specific funders that will look at specific pillars of the project and what we're sort of trying to highlight. And then the next crucial step is also to figure out how the food will be distributed, because a lot of the funders want to know not only how you will be growing, but where the food will be distributed to. So here are a couple of examples how other community partners have sort of distributed their food. Weekly food boxes work well. So having an operation where you're harvesting weekly, you're putting it into boxes and distributing it to community members, selling the produce to local health authorities or even education authorities. So if there's a week daily lunch program in the school, making sure that we're able to supply food for those services there. And some communities are also selling to local grocery stores and businesses also. So if there's a local retailer that's interested in buying the produce, making sure that we're able to offer them weekly volumes there. And then also a lot of communities have existing food sovereignty initiatives like a food bank or a food pantry or community kitchen, being able to supply donations directly through those venues there. So the idea of the first step is to be able to define the project scope, the pillars of the project in terms of, is it food sovereignty? Is it economic development? Is it more capacity building and education? And then how the food is going to be distributed sort of gives you an idea of what funding opportunities that you can approach. So for more social projects, there's a different funding stream and different expectations from funders. When there's economic development project scopes, then there's a different funders and there's different expectations there as well. So that really steps into the next step, which is more of the planning side for starting off your grant application. So in most community environments, what we typically tend to see is that funders want to know that there's the proper community leadership engagement and all that necessary work is being done to proceed with the grant application. So once we define the scope, presenting that to community leadership and getting the approvals to move forward with the project, and then confirming what department will be involved on the planning side of things. So that would allow us to sort of kickstart that grant process. And then the secondary step to that was, where will the project be located? So is it going to be next to the school? Is there a lot near the band office per se? Are we working next to the community garden where there's a location? So the site where will be the project located? And then the secondary step to that, the preparation of the site. So who will be able to do that work to get that site ready for the project? So is the lands team able to do that? And if not, we'll be working with local contractors to be able to get the site prep done. And then the third step to sort of starting the grant process is having those supporting documents. So ideally, when you have a community sort of leadership meeting, you want to make sure that you're having a letter of support signed or even a band council resolution that could be sort of attached to your future grant applications. So you have the supporting documents there, and then you also want to have estimates and quotes. So based off the solution you're looking at, having an estimate for that, and then for your contracting work as well, you have those quotes. And then based off the scope of your project, some funders will also require additional documentations, such as financial statements from the community, site documents on where it's going, financial commitment documents as well from the community or their organization, and supporting documents. So like business plans, feasibility studies as well. And those are typically dependent on the funder and the funding program. So in terms of grants and how that sort of process works and where we see a lot of the communities sort of leveraging their opportunities, typically what we see is the regional opportunities. So specific to where the community is located, there may be a few funding agencies that we could connect with. For example, if you're located in northern BC, there may be an agency that works specifically in your region. And then we have provincial funders. So the BC government, the Alberta government, the Ontario government, the Quebec government, they have different funding programs within their government agencies. So it could be in BC, the Ministry of Agriculture may offer specific funding programs. So looking at those. And then there's obviously the federal agencies. So Agriculture Canada, Indigenous Services Canada, et cetera. So typically, as you know, regional agencies work with communities specifically. So they have specific mandates that they're looking to meet, and there's a few folks or a few communities will be applying to those funds. And when you come from the federal perspective, there's a lot more folks applying to them, and there's stricter sort of guidelines and criteria to meet. So when you look at criterias, you'll see it breaks down into who is actually applying for the grant. So is it the community? Is it the development corporation of the community? Is it the school? So they might have different criterias. And then also their mandates. So is the funding for a food project specifically to build capacity and training opportunities for community members? Is it to grow food? Is it to process food? Is it to store food? Et cetera. So there's multiple different mandates that some funders might have, or they might have different streams to meet those certain mandates. So making sure that once we're looking at that funding, we're looking at it from those different criteria. So applicant who can apply, and then what's the scope of the project, and does it meet the mandates of the funders. So the next criteria to consider is the deadlines and the different stages. So as we see now, the funding programs having a quicker turnover, so they might open up in the beginning of April and close within 30 days. So that gives you a small window to get everything ready. So it's just making sure that you're able to meet those timelines. And that might include having a BCR signed, financial statements, having your site figured out. So given that sort of timeline, it really helps to have some of those supporting documents already done or in the process of being completed before starting off a grant application. And then once we meet those timelines and we have those supporting documents, the BCRs and the letter of support, et cetera, there may be additional requirements as well that we might need to meet. So some criteria from funders are the financial contribution. So how much in-kind contribution will be made for the project. So the project manager's time, the lands team support with the site preparation, and then they may also ask for cash contributions. So in terms of percentages, they may want a 50-50 split. And then also double checking on what expenses are actually eligible. So do they pay for training? Do they cover the cost of the actual growing facilities? Is it for research or is it for wages? So just making sure that all the criteria is met on the expense side of things. So I wanted to showcase a few examples here and what terms of criteria looks like. And here's a criteria checklist that was provided. So as you see here, for the specific funding opportunity, you have to meet one or two of these criteria here. So you have to be either a nonprofit, a municipality or regional government, or an Indigenous community, and then also have 2 years of sort of operations to prove that you've been in operation for 2 years. So you have to meet those two criteria to actually apply. And then other criteria examples here is what are the expenses and what is eligible and what's not. So as you see here, you cannot be purchasing vehicles, leasing equipment, renovations or constructions that have previously started prior to the funding being deployed, or even fund for-profit or commercial operations. So every funding program will definitely have their breakouts here, and then we'll be looking at those criteria very carefully before applying. Let me see if I could I'll take a look at the quick questions here, and I think a few of those questions have already been answered. So I'll keep moving on with the presentation here. So in terms of stacking, that is definitely something that is brought up by a lot of communities that we work with. So that is being able to put multiple funding options together. So having multiple different funders. So things to consider there is who is going to be the primary funder. So the primary funder is typically anyone that is funding over 50% of the project cost. So once we know who the primary funder is, what are their expectations for contributions? So are they okay with having another funder? Do they want a cash contribution from the community as well? What are their timelines? And do they need a secondary funder already? So just making sure that we're meeting all those criteria as well. And then who are the secondary funders? Do we meet their timelines? Do they need a confirmation from the primary funder? So all this sort of plays into meeting the criteria and the timelines of both funders. And again, both funders may have different timelines, different schedules. So just trying to coordinate that and making sure everything lines up perfectly with the timelines of the project. So I wanted to show an example of how possibly other communities have stacked the different funding options. And as you see here, they're looking to deploy a processing facility, a growing facility, and a root cellar. So that's their setup. So the total project cost is around 888,000 here. So their site preparation cost is around 55,000, which would be a non-cash contribution from the community that was applying for the funding. And then in-kind cash contribution was around $100,000. So Chief and Council wanted to put forward a $100,000 contribution. And then we have a federal grant, which there were two options at that time. There was Agriculture Canada and Indigenous Services Canada, and they were willing to contribute around $250,000 from a federal funding program. And then there's a provincial funder that was looking at around $100,000. And then the community partner was looking to finance the rest at the certain portion. So there are definitely opportunities to stack, but everything sort of needs to line up perfectly in terms of timelines. And the primary and the secondary funders need to also be okay with sort of mixing and matching and those timelines and when the money is spent moving forward. So the next crucial component of any grant applications is once you have the grant, putting together the application and then making sure that you're submitting everything that's required. So I would say over the last 2 years, there's been a shift towards sending in an application and creating an online portal. So just to highlight, if the application is due within a month, it might take a week or so to actually open up a portal, create your login. So you want to make sure that you're doing that in advance. So you have a login to directly fill up the application and submit. And then if you are also filling up a PDF document, you're filling up that PDF document with their formatting and then submitting directly to them. And then outside of that is making sure that you're attaching all supporting documents, because there are funders that will automatically eliminate you if you don't attach every document that's required. And then ensuring that one application is also sent from the applicant side of things. So some communities may have different departments applying for different funding, and some funders will only accept one application from a community. So whoever applies first will likely be picked, or they might automatically disqualify both applications. So you just want to make sure that there's one sort of application going through one specific funding program, unless specified that they'll take multiple applications from the same community. And after, when the application is submitted directly through a portal or through an email and all supporting documents have been signed and attached, you want to make sure that you're confirming with the funder that they have received your applications, because sometimes technology may not work and the application may not have been directly submitted. So usually the funders will follow up with a confirmation email, and they'll directly let you know that they've received your application, and they might let you know that it's a 90 business day waiting period before any sort of decision is made. So typically we'll have a expression of interest or first stage application, and then they may require a secondary application as well. So making sure that we understand that there may be a 2, even 3-step process. So you submit an EOI, gets approved, and then you submit your full-on application. So just making sure that you're looking at your email, making sure that you see those requests coming in, because sometimes they might have a follow-up question with you prior to submitting, giving you the full application for the second stage. So once that has been submitted, you typically have an approval process. So you're signing a contract, they'll give you timelines, what the contributions are, what the payments to the community would be made out to, and they also have some expectations on the reporting side of things. So unfortunately, if you were to get denied a funding from this funder, the key thing to do here is probably ask for feedback in terms of, why didn't we receive the funding? Should we apply for next quarter? Do you have any other recommendations from other funders or programs that we should be looking at? So sometimes it's first come, first serve basis for funding. So it may not be that you don't have the best application, and may be that they didn't have enough funding for this quarter. So you could definitely apply in the second quarter as well. So once you get a decline for funding, just making sure what that reason was. So in terms of previous funding agencies that we've seen for our community projects, federal agencies that we've seen are Agriculture Canada, Indigenous Services Canada, and then Innovation Science and ECDev Canada. So that agency has secondary agencies representing different regions. So we have the West, we have Prairies, we have Ontario North and South, and then you have Quebec and the Atlantic provinces. So there's different agencies within those departments, and then from regional and provincial funders, pretty much every province and territory has its own agencies. And again, it could be the social and development agency for those province or territories, or economic development, or even agriculture. Right now, we're in the sort of the weird phase for funding, because a lot of the government programs are shutting down, and there'll be quite a few opening up and having press releases in the next month or so. So typically they'll be launching their funds in April. So that would be probably the most crucial time to be following up with some of those agencies that you've previously worked with, or just checking out their website and refreshing the page to see if there's any new programs being added on. So just to give you more insights into specific programs that are currently available that could spark some interest for some of the folks attending here today, is the government of Alberta currently has a funding program that'll be opening up on April 21st. It's the ABIF. It's primarily funding capital costs for Indigenous-led community economic development projects that will both improve the social and economic outcomes for communities. So their application is currently available. Again, it's usually a first come, first serve basis. So having done all of your prep work and your scope, you're getting your letter of support, your supporting documents before the April 21st would be probably crucial. So once it opens, you're able to fill up the application and submit it at that time. And typically the funders will come back at you if they require anything. And that gives you enough time to resubmit if anything's required as well. Another program that I wanted to highlight was the BC funding opportunity. So this is the New Relationship Trust Fund. They have 2 different streams. And again, this is very specific for food and food security and food sovereignty, specifically for BC communities. There's two different streams. There's stream one that helps with the project planning side of things, and there's stream two that is more of the project implementation. So it's more of the capital costs. They had their first intake, which closed last year. Their second intake will be opening up on May 1st and closing on December 1st. And typically what we're seeing over the last 2 years is that even those closed deadlines typically tend to be moved up because a lot of folks start applying and they typically move up the date. And again, it is typically a first come, first served basis for these applications. So in terms of funding planning and coming up with a game plan for your project, based off your goals, the current funding programs that are available, our team can support with planning on the next steps with you. So what we recommend is booking an introductory call with us, and the goal would be to create a tailored funding list for you based off your goals and the community goals and your food sovereignty goals, and aligning all those requirements and those timelines. So I do have Holly here on the line here with us, and she's our grant expert, and I'll let her maybe introduce herself and sort of share what we do in the early stages of our planning steps here.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. So, yeah, I'm a grocer's grant writer, and then I guess just funding expert in general. So I've been in the grant funding space for just over 5 years, I guess now, and applied to a variety of different programs at both the federal, provincial, and like municipal and community level. So yeah, usually when we get introduced, we'll get kind of an understanding of a lot of the goals and sort of the landscape of what your project will look like. So what partners are at the table, what funding you might already have secured, or what funders you might have worked with in the past. And then we'll do a bit of a scan for programs that might fit your unique situation. Oftentimes we might have connections with these funders already, so it helps to kind of chat with us just to see if you could get a bit of a foot in the door. But yeah, either way, we do a bit of a customized plan for what sort of funding would fit your project. And also if you, I guess, are kind of not sure whether or not funding, or I guess what sort of funding path to take, it can be a good idea to chat with us just to hear what other communities who might have a similar profile to you have done to fund projects like this in the past. So I guess don't feel like you need to have kind of a set list of what your requirements are. If you just kind of want to chat to see what you should be thinking about in the first place, then we're definitely available. And like I said, can provide you with some examples of how communities that are similar to yours have done something like this in the past, because we understand that the funding world can be a bit overwhelming and there's a lot of different options. So we're definitely here to help navigate it and give you an idea of sort of where to start and where to go from there.
Awesome, Holly. Thank you so much. And like Holly mentioned, our goal is to sort of understand what the goals of the community are, and we're here to sort of figure out what the next steps are, and then work with you on the whole funding journey here. Based off where you're located, what your goals are, we'll be able to give you a few options on funding, timelines, what's required, and then work with you through that process. I know it's not going to be a short process sometimes with these funds, but we're here to sort of work with you on that entire journey. And then we could definitely share what other communities have done, what fundings they've leveraged, things like that, to also give you some insights into what has worked in the past. So for next steps, if anyone's sort of interested in looking at coming up with a game plan for their funding, planning and support, you could contact me directly. And what we could do is come up with a game plan on the next steps and looking at what funding is available, what fundings will be available over the next month or so as well, and sort of plan out for that application process. Again, some of these funds have strict deadlines. What we want to make sure is that we have enough time to work on that application with you and support you and have all the sort of documents attached to make sure that we're putting together the most holistic and direct sort of funding application that would fit for the funders and both for the community's needs there. So I want to thank you for joining us and maybe open up floor for any questions here. There's a few questions that were tossed in the chat. Um, there's folks from the Prince George area there. So like the BC funding there, that would definitely be a fit for you if you're looking at a food sovereignty project that we shared a few slides ago with the New Relationship Trust Fund there. Um, And if there's any other resources that you're looking at that you would need to support with the funding, I know some funders are looking at little feasibility studies or business plans, things like that. We could definitely support with you through that process as well. So we've had a few communities that were requested to supply a mini feasibility support or an assessment of what they're looking to do. We could definitely help with that also. So if there's no questions here, what we'll do next is we'll follow up with our contact information. And what we can do is also share these slides with you. So if you want to run through them, if you have any questions, again, don't hesitate to connect with us directly. And again, thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you have a great day.